A petition drive is underway in Tulsa asking for a grand jury investigation of Tulsa County Sheriff Stanley Glanz. The group is seeking to remove Glanz from office following the shooting death of an unarmed suspect by a 73-year-old reserve deputy who is a friend and supporter of the sheriff. The shooting is also raising questions about the training of reserve deputies across the state and has prompted drafting of a bill increasing the requirements to become a reserve deputy.
Tulsa County Reserve Sheriff's Deputy Robert Bates has pleaded not guilty to a charge of second-degree manslaughter in the death of Eric Harris. Harris was the subject of an undercover operation where he was caught handing over a weapon to a plainclothes deputy in an alleged illegal gun sale. When other deputies arrived to arrest Harris, he ran, was tackled to the ground, and then shot by Reserve Deputy Bates, who immediately claimed he had made a mistake. Bates says he thought he was shooting his taser at Harris, but mistakenly used his weapon. On NBC's Today Show, Bates demonstrated where he carried the stun gun.
My taser is right here on the front, tucked in a protective vest. My gun itself is on my side, normally to the rear.
Harris's death is raising national as well as state dialogue about the use of reserve deputies in their training. Steve Emmons is the director of CLEAT, the Council on Law Enforcement Education and Training. Even before the Tulsa incident, Emmons had concerns about the lack of continued annual training for reserve deputies who have received CLEAT certification.
Literally, you could have a situation where a person went through a reserve academy when they were 21 years old and continued to be a reserve officer until they're 71 years old, and never have to have, under current law, any additional training other than their annual firearms requalification, which is not training. It is simply showing that they're still able to qualify with their handgun.
State Senator Ralph Shorty says lawmakers were unaware there is no state requirement for continuing education for reserves.
The state really ought to know. If we're giving people police authority with a CLEAT commission card, then the state really ought to know how much training they've received. The state should have requirements for continuing education. It should be an automatic. That the fact that we've gone this long without that is kind of is concerning, and that's what we're trying to fix.
There are 3,500 reserve officers in the state, and their training requirements vary.
I'm a firm believer that the more you train, the more professional you become.
Oklahoma County Sheriff John Wetzel says his reserve officers must have 300 hours of CLEAT training, 60 more than required by law. Wetzel says all Oklahoma County Reserve officers must complete 12 to 16 hours of continuing education each year. But he says reserves working on certain details are required to have much more training.
Anybody who is on a special team, like our patrol division, is required to be at 30 hours every year. Our tactical team is required to train 2 days per month for 12 months. So an extension, and the same is true with those that are assigned to the bomb squad.
As chairman of CLEAT, Wetzel brought it to the attention of lawmakers that state law does not require continuing education for reserve officers.
Private investigators have required continuing education every year. Private security officers have required continuing education every year. But our reserve deputies don't have anything that's required.
Senator Shorty and State Representative Mike Christian are hoping to get a law passed in the last days of this session that will address reserve training requirements.
So our first step this year is to increase the training hours. We're going to increase it to half of what a law enforcement officer goes through. So it'll be 300 hours. And then a mandatory yearly continuing education course.
Questions also revolve around Reserve Deputy Bates' age. He is 73, and there's no state law limiting the age of peace officers.
To set a date at an age is difficult because different people, age at different rates.
The thing that you have to monitor is, regardless of what age, can that person fulfill the role that they are assigned to?
Sheriff Wetzel says there are no reserve deputies over the age of 52 serving on any of his department's tactical teams. The oldest on patrol is 70. He does not place anyone older in field work.
The only thing they do, they're in our administrative section. And what they do is they do senior citizen events. where we have maybe grandparents raising grandchildren, a Christmas event.
Glanz says Bates was fit for service and has received continuing training since he was hired as a reserve in 2007. Glanz says there were some irregularities in Bates' training, and his office has 2 internal affairs investigations underway. Sheriff Glanz has temporarily suspended the reserve program's advanced classification, which Bates had, pending an audit of every reserve officer's training.